My husband has secretly fathered his best friend's children. Now I'm terrified when his eldest son showed romantic interest in my daughter. All names are fake. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off, and over the years it has bloomed into a poison flower that infects my entire psyche. I'm a 42-year-old woman. My husband Luke is 43, and so is Amy. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. Naturally, I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about, that their bond was not romantic and had never been sexual, that Amy really was just the sister that Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any and all insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend, too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together, and we always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I spent many nights in the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how she is unlucky in love. Luke and I started to have children after we were married, and at around the same point, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. Now, Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating, but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Amy would find herself pregnant as well. It happened a few times, and Luke and I never knew anything about the fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed. This was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy knew of paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, of course, Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes. They are the kindest and gentlest people, so we were able to support Amy to get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help, and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly, that is a long story that I don't want to get into, because even I don't fully understand her reasoning. But it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control, and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it was that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that sometimes they hang out together while I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more. She was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and, at times, sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years they presented as being buddies, like siblings. I didn't pick up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one can expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house. Our home is decently sized, but even we don't have the room for 8 kids. But we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age. And they always got along, and strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good, especially if I'm right, and they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes. I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember seeing her with any real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties. I would try to be her wingman and so on, but nothing ever seemed to really happen. So when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella who she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had come just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy, and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me or our children. Not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could call it noble, but it combines with a lot of other little things. There is appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children, they certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kaylee has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom has gotten, the more of Luke I can see in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy, and Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. Doesn't mean Luke has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy and guilty or innocent. I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids, or Amy's kids. Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I have hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy, but he either missed my cues or pretended that he missed them. I don't want to push this idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. So far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world, she instantly fell in love with them. But motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So, I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. Got worse after the twins were born. I dismissed it. Then when Amy stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that. But Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights that I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time. But I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now, I'm very afraid because in the last few months, we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie? My eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and become quite the outspoken beauty. So I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention. But Tom asking her out had me thrown. Sophie said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating. And she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk to me about it. Bless my girl. She did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly. She just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to, and I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you, which he is, but it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so very curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved, and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them. Wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up. But I don't know. She just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom would spend more and more time with Sophie. They would be alone or with other friends, anytime they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie and wants to be with her. And he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and noticed his eye wandering many times. And while I'm doing everything I can to kill this budding romance in the crib, I also am feeling somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me. She's still just hanging out with Tom as friends. So forcing them to stop spending time together would be unreasonable, and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating and doing God knows what, when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she presents no objection whatsoever. And I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I always saw Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem is, of course, that if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years, and I'm right about the paternity of Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends, under any circumstances. End of discussion. It can never happen. I feel powerless to stop it though. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting, and he won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys that attention and devotion. Tom has also confronted me, and asked why I'm so against this, when I know him very well, and I know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say, other than to fall back on her being too young for him. But that won't work forever. If, God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, then they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there's nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They feel just as powerless as me to prevent teen love. It genuinely feels sometimes like they've just given up and will bury their heads in the sand about this. Just do nothing, and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Which, yeah, they're in high school. It's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes. Something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close. This close to screaming at Luke that all this wouldn't be happening if he hadn't cheated on me these many years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now, Luke's son wants to fuck our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend. And it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I am wrong, I'm a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something horrible. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've become over the last several years is gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie's eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend. And I'm low-key terrified it will happen sooner than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they wind up being together for years? What if they marry, want to get pregnant someday? And if I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else finds out too, and that's going to ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father and their aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I don't even want to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent. They didn't ask for this. They don't control where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Admittedly, I'm not happy with Tom at the moment. A week ago, I saw him put his hand on Sophie's butt, and I wanted to knock his teeth out. But even he doesn't deserve to be burdened by the knowledge that it's his half-sister he's been fantasizing about. It's all so fucked up, and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time now. I thought I could live with it. But this business with Tom and Sophie has me distressed. Judgment. T.A. Update 1. First of all, wow. I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared to Facebook. But, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was operating with an uncertain situation, and the stakes were incredibly high. I feel like no matter what choice I made, something could and likely would go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios, based on different ways I could go about this, if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who was clamoring for an update, I have one for you. One previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test, that I had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I am regretting that because the window to do so is essentially closed. I just felt like it would be out of line for me to do that to another person's child, behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against doing so because no matter what the results were, it would make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway, and just not told anyone. Because I really badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. Like I had no right to plant such ideas in her mind about her father, without even talking to him first. So what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other about what happened in their own words before I could prepare my own. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid down all of my suspicions and the reasons. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children, and I didn't even list all of them in the original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past. So have Sophie, Tom, and Adam. I said over and over how much they meant to me, and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past, how I had dismissed it before. But now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to pose the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line, if Luke had ever been unfaithful, if there was even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. Well, they reacted exactly as I would have expected. Their responses were perfect, and so very well rehearsed. I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, or at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were just acting, but I don't know. Somehow, they had reasonable responses to all of the points I brought up. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. I had never objected to them having alone time before. Why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much? Or are things like hair color pretty basic traits to have in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had previously commended Luke for stepping up and being a father to Amy's kids since they didn't have one. Why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? Why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Amy appeared to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times, even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he'd done to indicate he was unfaithful. I asked Amy more pointedly that, if not Luke, who had fathered her children. She snapped back that it was none of my business, and I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information was not a lot to ask, and perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them, but Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her. That it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She went on a longer tirade about how I had always acted superior to her, which I don't believe I did, though it's possible that I gave off that vibe unintentionally. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the room was still fraught with tension. I don't know, Reddit. I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course. Not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to say that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but that I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he did seem genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that him giving me his word, that he had always been faithful, was not enough for me. But he very reluctantly agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this, but Amy was infuriated at the whole concept, and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA, and basically told me to fuck off for asking several times, in several variations. I pressed Luke, and honestly he was a bit useless but probably right. He tried to convince Amy but she wouldn't hear of it, and he kind of shrugged to me when I pushed him for further support. Because he can't force her to get the test done. If she refuses, that's really a dead end. Trust me, it is. I looked into this quite a bit and consulted with my lawyer. The problem is, Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Tom and the others. The issue is that, to do this, he'd essentially be claiming he slept with Amy, and he believes her children to be his. That would be the version of events he'd be maintaining. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy, that he never cheated on me. Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd essentially have to go on record and make a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is quite certain the children aren't his, and he has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So no judge is going to compel Amy to submit samples of her children's DNA. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be a factor. If both he and Amy refuse to participate in the test, it's unlikely that Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like say, one of the twins. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please just let this go and trust him, because pursuing this will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would need to admit to an affair in the first place. And he's not doing that. And if he did, that would pretty much be all the proof I needed to be certain, even if I'd need more in a court case. I pestered him further about Tom and Sophie, insisted that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently, Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a talk with Tom and activate protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that, in a couple of months when he turns 18, him being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges against him, as I know he'd never do anything against Sophie's will. But I'm not above implying the threat. Thankfully, Luke isn't either. I did ask him if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA to do a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant about the idea. Like me, he viewed it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we were to do this and Amy found out, it would mean the end of our friendship with her, most likely. Things are, Luke believes, still in a salvageable state, where Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again. And I can see how much he wants this to happen. But if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back, and she found out, I think she would hit the roof, and I wouldn't entirely blame her, though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know all of you are cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it. That was a very long conversation, but he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control, so they spent the night together, with Luke maintaining that nothing happened. I did not sleep a wink, and I kept texting him for updates. So far as I can tell, Amy will cool off, but she needs a little time. Luke and I talked things over when he came back the next morning. It was an emotionally fulfilling conversation, and we ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit, but we've done it before, and they were delighted to have us. I just really wanted our family to spend some time together, away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love getting to see my in-laws. I'll refer to them as Jim, 75 million, and Kat, 67 degrees Fahrenheit. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mill from hell, but in my life that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them, to the point that when they took notice of how distant Luke and I were from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them of my anxiety that Amy and Luke were having an affair, and that Amy's children might be his. Here's where things got a little bit interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat just gave Jim this pointed look, and did a big dramatic sigh. So it turns out, Kat has had similar misgivings to mine, and genuinely suspected over the years that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, that they had crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, simply refuses to even consider the idea. He has always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there. He maintains that Luke and Amy are like siblings, and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance on this is naive, and that, even if she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that didn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister, or that she viewed him as a brother. But Jim just continued to insist that this is what they are and had always been. I could tell that he and Kat have already had this conversation before, and they kept going in circles with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that, surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy were not actually brother and sister, so nothing was stopping them from being physical together if they felt a mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. So, yes, Kat has privately wondered if Amy's children weren't fathered by Luke, which is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren, which was never something that I minded, to be clear. I also don't mind that Kat never voiced these concerns to me. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids, they're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but I think the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Amy and I had a fight and needed a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children, and when pressed for more information, Luke did defend me and shut down the questions, saying it wasn't their business. I don't know if Amy kept to that version of events, but my children and her children have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably still been in contact over the last 2 days. I think my kids would have kept Amy's kids in the loop on the updates, and if Amy had told them anything else significant, they would have relayed that information to my kids. After all, we know Sophie and Tom are very close. I did try and talk to Sophie about that more, but the timing was off, because Sophie rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being attributed to my fight with Amy. She maintained that she wasn't dating Tom. To what degree that's actually true, I don't know. But she was going to remain close friends with him, and while she isn't usually a disobedient child, she made it very clear that she was putting her foot down on this one, and, to be fair, I can't really justify trying to separate them or forbid them from being friends. They've known each other for years. Luke has my back on them not being allowed to date, but he wouldn't have my back on them not hanging out anymore. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I can let you guys know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not having done the secret test, even for my own peace of mind, as now I feel like I'm locked out of the only way to get definitive proof one way or the other. Comments. Comment 1. They spent the night together. Oh, come on. That's not acceptable. They're definitely a couple. Comment 2. Honestly, do you really think he's sleeping on the sofa? Why is he sleeping over there if there's nothing going on? You go to your friend's house and talk, and then you go back home to your wife and kids. WTF. What about your kids? He doesn't give a shit about any of you. Time to have another chat with the lawyer, and you really need to get more angry about this. You are way too understanding. This woman has wrecked all your lives, and even your in-laws have been suspecting the same all along. Comment 3. Luke and Amy are a couple and OP is the side piece at this point. Update 3. I think my husband fathered his best friend's children, and now one of them is attracted to my daughter. 1 day later. I didn't expect to have another update so quickly, but after posting my first update, I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with Luke and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant all the kids learned of the situation. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept her out of school. We went back home to our home last night, and this morning I dropped everyone off and saved Sophie for last before driving right past her school and telling her that we needed to talk. Always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I was quick to establish that she was not in trouble, but she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting. why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently explained that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and Tom's resemblance to him, I had come to suspect that perhaps Luke and Amy were intimate at some point over the years. If that was true, and there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, that would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's, and this is extremely important. So I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And read it. That's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least, they had strongly suspected. Apparently, Tom has overheard conversations that are questionable, as well as overhearing the sounds of sex from Amy's room. Sounds he would just as soon forget. But all signs point to Amy's lover having been Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with him. She could also see a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They agreed that because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same places as me, so Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends. But they had the same instinct as me, that they didn't want to blow up our entire family and social unit without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. And though Sophie very badly wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault, and that I loved her very much. So the bottom line is Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings, and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat. To force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool out of me. I also think it was Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive. So they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I've witnessed, every inappropriate touch, all staged, apparently, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, that kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned at how sneaky they've been. But, honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent, I guess, but they apparently already knew that they're likely related. They didn't blink at all when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off. She is. But so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say that it is such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me. And even though I basically just got it absolutely confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway, so now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA, so I can compare it to Luke's, And both he and Sophie advise me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Comments. Comment 1. Okay, doke. Tom and Sophie have to be sitting on the couch when Luke comes home and drops the bomb that Sophie is pregnant. Or, to say that they had the same thoughts and did their own DNA tests and surprise. You are the father up. Actually, that was something they had considered doing before. Now that the three of us are on the same page, it's not the worst idea. Comment 2. Why not just DNA test the two kids against each other and stop dragging it out? The test will let you know if they share the same father, and then it would be clear your husband is the father of both. Comment 3. Getting 2 ancestry test kits is simple. They are on Amazon. Comment 4. I don't even care if it's fictional or not. These updates have me hooked. Comment 5. I finally understand why my granny used to watch those god-awful drama shows. It's super fake, but damn if it isn't entertaining. These posts are just new age soaps. I am not the OP, please. Do not harass the OP. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My wife, 30 female, gained a lot of weight after giving birth, so I'm 32 male, thinking about divorce. All right. Before I get called an asshole, let me explain. I love my wife. I think she's incredibly beautiful, and even more so after she gave birth to our son 3 years ago. The problem is that she put on a good amount of baby weight, obviously, and never lost it. She instead started to gain more weight and was overall pretty depressed. I initially assumed it was PPD and suggested she go to therapy for it. She went to therapy and got some antidepressants. It took her a while to find the right ones, and she's been fine mentally since she found them. Physically is a different story, however. She has continued over the past 3 years to gain weight. The problem isn't anymore that I'm not attracted to her, but she will die if she continues to gain weight. She is currently 5 feet 2, about 260 pounds, with a BMI close to 50. I don't know what I can do. I feel like I've tried everything. I've asked her to go to the gym with me, go on a diet with me, not buy fast food, and have some active hobbies. She's turned down every single one of these ideas. I feel like I don't have any choice but to give her an ultimatum. Either she genuinely tries to lose the weight, or I leave. I can't watch the woman I love and mother of my child slowly kill herself. I don't want to be the dude who gives an ultimatum, but I see no other choice. I guess I just wanted to ask if I'm being an asshole, or if there's any other way I could go about this. Edit. For everyone in the comments telling me you can be overweight and healthy, you're right. But no, you cannot be obese and healthy. At least, not long term. Heart disease runs in my wife's family, and while your weight might not affect you, being overweight is directly linked to heart disease. I understand, weight loss isn't easy. I used to be overweight, but my concern isn't that she's not the same way she looked when we got together. It's that she may not live to see our son become a teenager. Update. So I made a post about 5 months ago because I was getting past the point of no return with my wife's weight. Now expectedly, I got called an asshole and a dickhead, and every other name under the book for evening mentioning it. But I also got some real good feedback, and decided before I made any real decision, I would sit her down and let her know how I was truly feeling. Because at that point, we had multiple conversations addressing it, but none of them led anywhere. So after we put my son to sleep, I asked my wife if we could talk for a moment in the kitchen. Now, I'm not going to lie. The conversation was probably the hardest one I've ever had. Because despite what everyone believed, I do love my wife. Now, I don't want to get into every detail, but the basis of the conversation was that I needed her to at least try and be healthier. I also think she needed to hear how serious I was about this. And when I told her I was even thinking about separating, I think it really put the nail in the coffin. It's been about 5 months since then, and I'm proud to say, my wife has lost 35 fucking pounds. I am so proud of her. It's fucking ridiculous. The first month was a fucking hurdle and a half, but now she's going steady and losing weight at a healthy moderate rate. Recently, she even started to exercise with me. In the morning, I usually jog, but since her knees are somewhat shot 3 days a week, we go walk a mile or 2 together and either talk or just listen to music together. I know it sounds corny to say, but she even seems happier, and her confidence is coming back as well. Well, this was my little update, and I wanted to finish it by thanking anyone who actually gave me advice on my first post. Reminder, I am not the original poster. I was uninvited from a planned vacation with my boyfriend and his best friend. She threatened to cancel if I did. Original post. My boyfriend wanted to go on a vacation this summer to his mom's friend's house in Hawaii with me and his two best friends, 25 male and 29 female. We had been planning on this all spring, and at some point, 25 male dropped out of the trip, leaving just the three of us. For context, my boyfriend and I have been going out since November, and it's been serious. We had, and still have, been talking about moving in together, and he has said, and I agree, that this is a long-term situation and that we are in it for good. In early June, once 25 male unexpectedly dropped out of the trip, 29 female called my boyfriend and told him that now that it was just the three of us, she didn't feel comfortable with me going on the trip, since she didn't know me that well, and she didn't want to be a third wheel. She said that if I were to go, she wouldn't go on the trip. Without telling me that this was happening, they changed the plans and made it a trip, just the two of them, and they changed the location to a beach in Costa Rica. I was trying to figure out when to ask for time off this summer, and hadn't heard news about the plans. So I asked my boyfriend which week in August I should be setting aside for the Hawaii trip. He let me know that, actually, he had talked to his friend, and that she didn't want to go if I were going. So he was going to go alone with her to Costa Rica. He said that we could go another week later, maybe to Mexico City or something. I was upset and tried to talk with him about how the situation made me feel, especially since this wasn't a case of a separate trip being set up ahead of time. This was a case of me being invited, and then uninvited from a week-long tropical vacation, with a girlfriend of his who I had never met before. We eventually decided to do a trip together to Copenhagen, which we have both wanted to visit, as some sort of compensation. I also asked to meet her so that I could feel more comfortable with the trip. We spent the July 4 going to see her and her boyfriend in the city where they live, and although it was nice to put a face to a name, it was ultimately a very cold trip, and she was not at all welcoming to me. My boyfriend remarked on how unfriendly she was to both of us, he thought, and said that he was surprised that she didn't act warmly to me. I went out of my way to try to get to know her and her boyfriend. I'm very outgoing and friendly, and usually this would be easy, but it didn't really click, even after several days. They were somewhat cold to each other as well. They bickered a little bit about their future and his own 3-week trip, without her that was scheduled for the same time as their trip. This had been scheduled before ours had. This had been my effort to feel better about the trip, so I told my boyfriend that I still didn't feel comfortable with things, and that I was feeling insulted by the way that it was handled. I had tried to make things smooth between all of us, and I asked him to please come up with something that could help me feel better about the trip. On a visit to his family, they asked about the trip, and they were all shocked that he would have arranged it this way and let me know that they would have been furious if they were in my position, which triggered a fight in which I asked him to please help come up with a strategy to make me feel better and more secure about them going together without me. He said that he would never do this kind of thing again, which feels like not much to offer, since this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip to begin with. He kind of offered to not go on the trip, but he had already paid for the tickets and made arrangements, and I didn't want to stop their trip and be resented by both him and his best friend. He asked me to give him ideas of how to make me feel better, and wanted me to just tell him what to do installed until it was finally the day of the trip. He bought me a bag of peanut butter cups, and I drove the two of them to the airport. I feel so disregarded and disrespected in this situation. I want to break up with him, but I don't want to burn up something that has otherwise been really good. Too long, didn't read. I, 28 female, was uninvited from a vacation with my boyfriend, 29 male, and his best friend, 29 female, and I can't get over it. I want advice on how to talk with him about this. Update 1. I was really upset the day I dropped him off, and he was texting me, but I wasn't responding. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do anything at all in the state I was in. I waited until the next day, and then I sent him a thought-out text, letting him know that I didn't feel safe or loved in the way the trip was handled, and that I would be dropping his things off at his place and leaving his keys with the neighbor. He called, but didn't leave any messages, and then he messaged me that he didn't understand. The rest of the week, he called and messaged me, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up or text back. On Thursday, I think that he realized that I was serious, and he asked me some questions about logistical things. I told him which neighbor his key was with, etc. When he got back and saw all his things at his place, he got pretty frantic and called and left me a long message. I was working all day, but also, I still didn't want to respond. He asked me to explain because he didn't understand what was going on. The next day, I sent another text making it clear that it was over, and he got upset and sent me a bunch of texts in a row about how he didn't understand why I was throwing away everything that we built. He left me a voicemail that was really angry, that said he had no idea why I was upset, and that he did not accept the breakup because he had no say in it, and that he wanted me to tell him the evil story that I had made up about him to his face. I wasn't going to respond to him, and I wanted to remain calm, but this upset me, so I sat down to write him this letter. It's long, so skip over if you want. I tried to call him, but I started crying and told him I just send him an email instead. This is what it said. The time that we have had apart has given me some good space and time to think. I've had a chance to think about the things that are important for me in a relationship, and I see that we should not be together. I am sorry that I have been asking for you to change things about your life, that you shouldn't have to change at my or anyone's behest. From the very start, this trip was made in an insanely disrespectful way, in which it started out from you being given an ultimatum by your female best friend, who I had never met, that either she goes or I go on this trip, and you picked her. You didn't offer to have her meet me. Theoretically, I was your long-term partner, so this would have made a lot of sense. You didn't encourage her to find someone else to come, and you didn't consult me at all. That's enough for most people to have a deal breaker right there. However, I state, this is a person who you have a history with that is not entirely clear to me. Here's what I understand. Some bad rumors got started about the two of you in which you spent an entire night out with her on an acid trip while you were dating someone else. Nothing happened. The other thing I understand is that you were interested in her romantically at some, theoretically, other point, and that she started dating her boyfriend, and that closed the door on things for you. According to what I also understand, it took a long time for 29F's boyfriend to feel comfortable with you being around. But you apparently worked to ultimately make him feel comfortable with you after I'm not sure how long. This is the completely unknown person who shut me out of a trip that I was originally going to go on. Unilateral decision. You did not tell me this was happening until I asked when the trip to Hawaii would be. You purchased tickets in another very disrespectful situation in which I have cooked dinner and have guests present. And you choose to go into my room for well over an hour to select tickets with her, and in which I repeatedly ask you to please come to dinner because you say it will just be a few more minutes each time. There is absolutely no reason for doing it at that time, and in that situation, seeing as how she is in the same time zone as us and has a 9-to-5 job. This makes me feel sick to my stomach. So to make myself feel better about this whole arrangement, I tell you that I want to meet this person. On my request, we arranged a trip to go meet her and her boyfriend, a brief trip in which they are. And you explicitly agree, inexplicably cold. The first conversation that we have is one in which 29 female and her boyfriend argue about how she dumped him while he was already in a relationship and got him to date her instead. You tell me about conversations that 29 female has had with you recently, in which it seems implied that there is some real instability in their long-term relationship. Stuff about kids and dogs. I have a discussion in which I let you know that I see that and that it worries me. Meanwhile, I am still wanting all of this to work out for you and for me and for her. I, at this point, am planning on being with you for the long term and see no benefit in telling you to not go on a trip with your best friend. I want it to work out, but each and every interaction surrounding this trip chips and chips and chips and chips away at my ability to handle it. The conversations that seem to go nowhere, etc. Your dad, your mom, and your grandparents are all very surprised when we tell them about this trip. It is becoming very obvious that this is a dangerous trip to make with the fragility of our relationship. 29 million? We had only been together for 9 months. How long did it take before 29 female's boyfriend was comfortable with you hanging around, much less going on a one-on-one international tropical vacation in which he was uninvited because of your request? We go over it with friend at the rock climbing gym. We go over it in the car. We go over it while we're booking our Airbnb for Copenhagen. We go over it when I tell you that I still feel uncomfortable and I do not feel good about the trip. Talk about repeatedly saying something. Although I ask for you to help me, you actually ask me instead to come up with what would make me feel better. Surprisingly, I have no ideas either. Ultimately, it appears that the original plan to meet at my place and hang out and do a game night before you two go on the trip has been cancelled, and 29F will be staying at my place, but not hanging out with us at all beforehand. You attribute it to you not bringing it up with her early enough. This is apparently not something that was discussed even 2 nights before the trip. This upsets me. You do not know what to do. I don't blame you. At this point, it was well out of hand. I don't know what to do either. There is no good solution that I can think of besides waiting for the trip to be over. I tell you that either I have to get over it, or I have to break up with you, and that I don't want to break up with you. But my ability to get over it is rather worn down. She arrives at my place very late, and we wake up the next morning for me to take the 2 of you to the airport. After all of this lead up, I know that you can tell how unhappy I am. I fully absolutely know you can tell how unhappy I am. You leave, and when I don't respond to your text messages, you text me to tell me that you hope I'm okay and you're going to bed. No call. The rest of the week was rough. My text to you was met with, essentially, I'm sorry you feel this way. You tell me that I'm being unfair. There is no acknowledgement, and there still has been none, that this trip to a fucking honeymoon destination, as we have discussed before, could be a crazy and horrible thing to go through with, even with my quasi-blessing. This is not something that people in relationships have to deal with. This is not something that people in relationships do, besides 29 female, I guess. In the end, all of this is to say that I have felt serious emotional needs go seriously unmet in a way that is a deal breaker for me. There have been some wonderful, very positive times, but there has been an unnecessary amount of heartache and suffering for me over things that come down to what I can only assume are personal differences. I cannot handle your relationship with a 29 female, and I suppose I could ask you to pick between her and me, but that's not what I want to do. I want you to have your best friend, and I want to leave. I did love you, but I am not about to fight this fight and hear you tell me that I'm crazy for not seeing how totally platonic everything is for the rest of my life. It seems like trying to convince someone to like different food, or to have a different favorite color. I am not happy about this, and I do not want to feel these feelings any longer. There is no need for this to be mutual. I do not need your permission to break up with you. He wrote me back an apologetic email in which he accepted responsibility for most things, without any argument. Except he denied anything that had to do with his relationship with her, making me feel uncomfortable, and he denied that I would not be able to handle their relationship. He said that the only thing that made their trip bad for me was my own perspective. I wrote him back that trust has to be built, and that he put too much strain, too early, on a relationship in which we had not developed that trust. He agreed and apologized. For me, it ended on a pretty amicable note, but this style of relationship really doesn't work for me, and I don't feel like his responses to me really healed or changed anything significantly. I stand by my decision at this point. Too long didn't read. We broke up. Reminder, I am not the original poster. I overheard my fiancée say my money was the best part of me, so I humiliated her. She trashed my house, and now I'm taking her to court. I am now 29 years old, with an MBA, and a very lucrative position in my father's firm. I know this makes me sound like a snobbish, affluent kid, but please hear me out. Growing up, we weren't doing well. We battled a lot, and our family was deeply in debt. I was young at the time, so I don't remember every detail, but my father made a highly hazardous loan with our house as security, which was the only valuable asset we had because it was his grandfather's. That money was what let him launch his business, and despite a tough start, things improved. It wasn't enjoyable at the time, but looking back, I'm thankful that I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I believe it made me more down to earth and helped me understand the importance of hard effort. This experience prompted me to get an MBA because I wanted to contribute to what my father had established. While it may appear that I'm merely the son working in his father's company, benefiting from nepotism, I confess there is some truth to this. But I also know I'm there on merit. I worked hard and put forth my own effort to help the company flourish. As a result, my family and I are both financially secure. Because of this, I've become quite cautious in relationships, knowing that we didn't always have this money and don't want to wind up with someone who is only interested in my bank account. In my mid-20s, when things were going well, I dated a lot. Many of my dates did not even make it past the first date. I probably only went on a third date a few times. Then, 2.5 years ago, I met someone named Brianna, not her real name for obvious reasons. She was beautiful. When I saw her smile, I wanted to go say hello. I discovered she was a nurse, which made her even more appealing to me because it is a career I much admire. I asked for her phone number, and that was the beginning of our relationship. I've always been careful in relationships, and I approached them with the goal of determining whether the individual could be my future wife before taking things too seriously. I aim to make sure that money is only a minor part of the reason someone is with me. I don't want somebody to be with me based only on the fact that I'm attractive. Brianna did not exhibit any gold-digging activity that I noticed. She was intelligent, witty, and brought everything I desired to the table. So 2 years after we met, I proposed to her, and she accepted. Brianna is currently my fiancée, and she promised to spend the rest of her life with me, which made me very pleased. I'm about to get to the point of this narrative, but first, there was one important event that soured me. It is worth highlighting. Obviously, as we got closer, Brianna learned more about my family's financial situation. She knew my family was not impoverished, and that we were doing well. A few months after the proposal, I mentioned the possibility of a prenuptial agreement. To be honest, I felt it was a perfectly acceptable conversation, but she disagreed. She flipped out. According to her, suggesting a prenuptial agreement was bad for 2 reasons. First, it appeared to her that I did not think our relationship would last. That is not true. But even if I'm completely dedicated to the marriage, if she wakes up one day and says she is done, I have no influence over that. Second, she interpreted it as a sign that I did not trust her not to rob me if things didn't go as planned. That's the gist of it. But we ended up arguing for an hour and going to bed upset with each other. After pondering all night, I informed her that the prenuptial agreement would be unnecessary. Yes, I know it was silly, but I loved her so much that I decided to let it go because I didn't want the prenup to be the reason we broke up. Following all of that, things improved between us very quickly. Now I truly need third parties to tell me what to do. One of my fiance's colleagues was holding a barbecue, and she encouraged me to join them. I decided it would be a wonderful opportunity for me to meet some of the people she worked with, as she referenced them constantly. When I arrived, everyone was friendly, and I had a terrific time. To be honest, I met several of the nurses that worked with her on most shifts. At one point, I was outdoors talking with a fellow about sports and investments. I knew she was inside conversing with her pals, and that was okay. When I realized I wanted to use the restroom, I returned to the house via the back door. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the back entrance led to a hallway that terminated in the living room. Standing at the rear door, you couldn't see anyone seated in the living room until you turned the corner. As I was headed to the bathroom, I heard my fiance's voice among others, and it was evident from the first sentence that I was the subject of talk. It began with them discussing how well I dress, which naturally led to how pricey my clothing is. Then my money showed up. The girls were chirping and smiling as they discussed how fortunate she was to have found someone with money. Then I heard my fiancé say something that hit me hard. He has a lot of money, and honestly, his money is the best part of him by far. This was followed by more giggling and laughter. She even said he asked for a prenup. I said no, of course, I need to be able to pay out if things go south. More laughter followed. At that point, I walked back out of the house. I honestly did not need to use the restroom anymore. When we returned home, she recognized something was wrong with me, but I didn't tell her until she went to bed. This happened a few days ago, and I'm not sure what to do. She's a wonderful person, and I adore her, but I'm having a struggle with myself about whether I should dismiss it as dumb girl talk that went too far, or if it's worth canceling everything we've planned for the wedding and kicking her out of the house. I honestly don't know what to do. My mind is telling me to stop things since this is exactly what I didn't want. Someone who values my money too highly. She was the perfect lady for me just a few days ago, and I hate how quickly things changed. My heart is asking me to talk about it, but I can't figure out why. I would appreciate any and all advice. Edit 1. Many people believe that I should not have compromised on the prenuptial agreement and should have stopped things right there. Many of you expressed it in overly harsh ways, but I have strong skin. If I had the chance again, I might not have done things differently, but I agree that I would give someone else the same counsel that many of you are giving me here. I should have remained firm on the prenup since, even if I decide to stay with her, the comment I overheard emphasizes how essential a prenup is to her. Edit 2. I'm inclined to agree with people who think I should terminate things now rather than take a chance with someone who has demonstrated that my money is his major concern. The only issue is, I believe the best case scenario is that we revisit the prenuptial agreement. I know it would protect me, but it wouldn't necessarily change her attitude toward my money. But isn't it natural for someone to appreciate that their partner has a nice income? Edit 3. Okay, I've had a lot of sense instilled in me. I will still bring up the prenup to see what she says, but I am ready to terminate things. I adore Brianna. Therefore, it's difficult for me to let her go. I want to know if I gave things a chance. Update. Here's the update that I know many of you have been waiting for. The story about my fiancée, who I overheard telling her friends that my money was the best part of me, has concluded, and I am overjoyed with how things turned out. The first thing I needed to do was speak with Brianna again about the prenup. I believe it was about a week after we returned from the cookout that I told her to sit down for a discussion. When I informed her we wanted to talk about the prenup again, she blew up, like she had the last time. It got even worse the second time around. She complained about how it showed I didn't trust her and wasn't rooting for the relationship to succeed. I attempted to explain that it was about defending my father's hard work. I own a substantial portion of his company rather than protecting myself. But she wouldn't have it. She kept yelling, and I tried everything I could to persuade her of my point, but nothing worked. I asked her if she would marry me if the prenup was a requirement. She didn't ponder long before announcing that she would seriously examine our future together. At that time, I realized I couldn't win her over. I informed her that after the first time, I was willing to drop the prenup, so I asked her to guess why I was bringing it up again. She was obviously bewildered, so I promised her I'd help her figure it out. I asked her to recall a conversation she had with her nursing colleagues at a friend's cookout. It was all she said. We talked about so many things. I don't know what you're talking about. I responded. You don't recall smiling and joking with your pals, claiming that my money was the nicest part of me? You don't remember telling them you couldn't sign a prenup because you wouldn't get the cash if we divorced. At that point, it was evident she remembered what I was saying, because she began to quiver and appear incredibly anxious. I waited for her to affirm or reject what I had stated, but she did not respond. I pushed her to talk, but she only stared at me, her hands trembling. I'm not sure why, but that made me giggle, and it appeared to set her off. She started crying and wailing without responding to anything I had said. At that moment, I was frustrated that she had nothing to say, and I expected a response from her. So I told her that the wedding was no longer going to happen. She slumped on the ground, muttering, "Please," through tears and sniffles. I stood up, went into our room, locked the door, and went to bed. The following morning, she was waiting for me. She didn't appear like she had slept all night. When she saw me, she approached me and was extremely friendly, but I shook her off. She attempted to explain the context of what I had overheard, stating she was simply trying to fit into the gossip girl ambiance and did not mean what she had said. She accused her friends and colleagues of being terrible influences. She argued that my money was not the reason she fell in love with me. I thought it might be true at first, but I had the impression that she had grown to adore the money. She claimed she would sign the prenup and that it would not be an issue for her. Even with that, I didn't know what to say to her. I took her hand, looked her in the eye compassionately, and carefully removed the engagement ring from her finger. I had paid a lot of money for that ring, and I didn't want it to end up in her hands. That hit a nerve. She began crying, but quickly switched to cussing me out. She branded me ugly, unattractive, with a little penis, and even queer. She stated she slept with a man she met at a bar, simply because she felt like it. I'm not sure if I believe that part, but it really doesn't matter anymore. She stated my money was the one thing she liked about me, and she wished she could have milked me for more. She threw every insult she could think of at me, and I eventually started giggling. That's when she started throwing stuff at me. As much as I wanted to remain calm and unconcerned, she began flinging some potentially deadly stuff. So I ran to the bedroom and shut myself in. It took almost 2 hours until things calmed down. When I came out, she had left, but she had wrecked the entire apartment. I was enraged, and in that moment, I knew I had made the proper decision. I photographed everything and obtained footage from one of the indoor cameras I'd put. After that, I left the house and went to sleep in a hotel because it was complete pandemonium, and I had no idea where to begin with the cleanup. This is where I chose to have fun. I visited her Facebook and Instagram profiles, where she had announced our engagement. I composed a message. I'm sorry to inform you that the wedding has been canceled, and I am no longer engaged to Brianna. She acknowledged being with me solely for the money, and when I challenged her about it, she lost her mind and wrecked my house. If you have any queries, please ask her. I replied to each and every comment. She despises looking awful in front of others, so this aspect was very enjoyable. I then created my own post, displaying the devastation she had wreaked, as well as brief bits from video of her trashing the house during her tantrum. I tagged her relatives and friends, as well as the hospital where she works. The last one was just for fun, and it felt wonderful knowing that some rumors about her would circulate among her colleagues. Her parents called me several times, but I didn't answer. It's unfortunate that I have to cut ties with them because they were such kind people. But that's the way it is. She contacted me dozens of times after I had done all of this, and when I answered, she was crying and threatening to kill me for wrecking her life. I don't believe anything I did was permanent, so she was simply being dramatic. She raged about how I humiliated her with the brief bits I shared, and how people now refer to her as Brianna of Tarth behind her back since she acted so aggressively in that video. That part made me laugh so hard. She was crying because everyone was now looking at her differently. I'll be honest, I was concerned she'd do something wild because the tantrum she threw at home wasn't quite the Brianna I knew. In the end, nothing occurred, at least not yet. I called the event coordinator and canceled all wedding-related activities. That portion was heartbreaking, I'll admit, but it had to happen. Once that was over, I realized she and I were done. The nicest part for me is that I'm bringing her to court to get compensation for ruining my stuff. I begged her to pay properly, but she just called me some nasty insults. So I don't mind putting her through some extra stress, just for fun. She will have to pay a lawyer, lose days of work, and perhaps be obliged to compensate me for everything she has ruined. Believe me, that was a lot. The matter is still pending, but I have a recording of her acting like a bull in a china shop. And I've already spoken with my lawyer, so there's no need to fear. She won't be getting out of this one. There's still a little sadness in my heart because something I had high hopes for didn't work out. But I'm glad I discovered how she truly saw me sooner rather than later. I'd rather be in pain right now than in much worse pain later. Anyway, a huge thank you to everyone who helped me out, especially with my prior post. I will read all of your comments here, so please let me know what you think of how I responded to her. Brief update. Oh, and a little update for anyone reading this thread. I was awarded $987 for everything she ruined in my flat, including hotel bills because I couldn't remain there and professional cleaning fees because the place was a complete disaster. I had a tremendous smile on my face because I was getting money from her after we split up. I guess she should have asked for a prenup. Refused to babysit on the family vacation. Now my sister's furious. My parents are involved, and the whole trip might be canceled. At 23, I've often been assigned the roles of assistants and babysitter on family outings. I had to move out of my parents' house because I was constantly being forced to watch my 3 nephews. Last summer, we went on a family vacation to the seashore. I traveled with my parents, who paid for my hotel room. However, I had to share a room with 3 loud boys because my sister and her husband preferred a separate room. I was promised time to do my own thing throughout the vacation, but I ended up needing to help with the kids. I protested to everyone about it and was told that I was there for free. We only did one thing I wanted: visit an art gallery. I enjoy doing this anytime I'm at the coast, but the kids found it dull. This year, my parents have a beach trip planned for June, and they figured I'd be riding the same route as last year. I refused. I stated that I would drive myself and pay for my own hotel stay to have my own room. My parents were surprised and attempted to remind me of the cost. I told them not to worry. I have a nice job and a decent operating automobile, so I can easily afford it. That's when the but began. I enumerated the reasons why I will drive alone and pay for my own room. I want to enjoy my vacation as an adult rather than being treated like a child, like I was last year. My parents informed my sister, and she called to yell at me, saying I'd be spoiling the holiday if I was off doing my own thing while she had to wrangle her 3 boys. I ended myself ranting at her, pointing out how all she did last year was drag me into her mess. I didn't get to do much of what I wanted, and was seen as the bad guy for simply wanting to go to an art gallery. I'm a grown man who deserves his own vacation. My sister has stopped speaking to me, and my parents are still trying to persuade me to ride with them to keep the peace. I am still refusing, but the pressure is getting to me. Am I a jerk for not giving in? I know they'll struggle if they don't have someone to aid them. Edit. My sister, who appears to be a Reddit lurker, saw my post less than an hour after I wrote it. She's furious with me and upset that no one in the comments agrees with her. She went on a rant about how difficult it is to be a parent to triplets, and how the least I could do was help, because I am young and unmarried. She stated she needed a break. I kept my position, and now she is contacting our parents to get them involved. I expect a call from them any minute. Update. Now that I'm off work, I can tell you more about what happened. To put it simply, it is over. My sister got our parents involved. They glanced at my post and were startled by the number of comments. Yes. They're upset with me for writing here, but I reminded them that if they'd just listened to me from the beginning, I wouldn't have had to. I'm tired of the keep the peace mentality that makes me a sacrifice for my sister. In turn, they went off on her, and the entire vacation was canceled. The hotel hadn't been booked yet, but my parents are bickering with my sister, who is blaming me, and my nephews are sobbing because they won't be going to the beach. My sister contacted me at lunch and hinted that I have no life, therefore I have time to help her. I filmed that and informed our parents, which is what they are currently fighting about. Small update. I was not going to update again, but here's a little more. My parents claimed they would never force me to babysit my nephews again and agreed that what happened last year was unfair. They're currently furious with my sister for telling me that I should help her since she believes I have no life. My sister is playing the victim, while my brother-in-law is mainly out of the picture, spending his time at work. Thank you to everyone who commented. You made my day. Update 1. My parents apologized, but my sister didn't, at least not first. I created this throwaway account a week ago to see if I was the jerk. It turned out that I was anything but. I have too much to say to publish an update on AITA, so a friend suggested I come here. Posting on. I, the jerk, literally opened a Pandora's box among the family. Basically, my parents and older sister were extremely comfortable with me assisting with the care of my young triplet nephews. I didn't leave home until I was 22, since I was attempting to save money while also attending college. A scholarship covered a lot, and living at home protected me from going into debt, because I was also working part-time. I am very grateful for this. However, after college, everyone treated me as if I had limitless free time and persuaded me to accompany them on a family trip. During this so-called vacation, I was compelled to babysit my 3 6-year-old nephews. I had to share a motel room with them, and trust me, those youngsters didn't listen to a word I said. They did not behave the first night until I contacted their mother twice. Even so, I was considered the bad guy for wanting to do other things on the trip. It seemed as if it wasn't something the entire family enjoyed. It wouldn't happen. This was highly hypocritical, because I too am family, and was not involved in the voting. You can bet I discussed this issue with my parents following my previous post, and they admitted they were incorrect. After that dreadful vacation last year, I decided it was time to move out, and I did so before the summer was up. This astonished everyone because I gave them no notice. I obtained a terrific job very immediately after graduation, owing to an internship, and I utilized the move as an excuse to reduce my commute from 45 to 15. My sister despised it the most because it meant no more free babysitting on weekends, but she still attempted to force me to do it. I caved occasionally, usually after being tempted with pizza, and this became the new normal. But then, last month, my parents revealed plans for another family trip to the same location down the coast, and they essentially wanted everything to proceed the same way. I quickly recognized it for what it was, a trap. I knew that if I rode with my parents and allowed them to pay for the hotel rooms, I would be taken advantage of again. So I casually mentioned that I would drive and pay for myself, and that's when the storm began. When my parents realized they couldn't entrap me like previously, they turned to borderline begging. And my sister practically tried to force me to go along with the flow by gaslighting. Newsflash, I didn't. After refusing to give in to my sister's demands, I made the M1, the jerk article, following days of pestering. My sister discovered the post in less than an hour. What followed was Pandora's box. Initially, the family was against me. My sister called our parents, and they called me when I still had some time to talk in the morning. My folks were on the phone with me as they read my post. I inquired if they thought anything in the post was a lie. They skirted the issue by calling the piece an exaggeration, but I pointed out other elements that proved it to be rather accurate. Then I instructed them to check the remarks. There were already way too many to read. I kept refreshing the website on my own computer and informing them how many comments there were. Then I informed them I was weary of their approach to keeping the peace by pressuring me to please my sister. I mentioned I was out of time and that we would have to resume later. My parents were absolutely frightened that hundreds, if not thousands of people had commented in a matter of hours. Later, I informed them that the numbers had nearly doubled and were continuously increasing, which only added to their anguish. I guess they were forced to reflect on their own behavior. My sister tried to call me while I was at work, but my phone was set to mute until my lunch break, so she could only leave messages and texts. She was persistent and got through to me when I was eating my lunch. The gist of the talk was that my post had pushed our parents away from her side, and they were now angry with her. My parents canceled the entire vacation after their dispute. Yes, they eventually admitted that they simply passed the blame out of embarrassment and accepted full responsibility. They told me that no justification could justify making me their go-to free babysitter when I no longer lived at home. They attempted to backtrack a little by pointing out that they never charged me rent when I was in college. But I reminded them that children do not beg to be born, and I was working hard to make my own way. Then I mentioned that my father had the same advantage because his parents allowed him to live at home for free while in college. That very much ended whatever dispute my folks had left. When my sister called me at lunch, I explained the situation to her, and she revealed her true colors. She intimated that I had no life and that my free time on weekends should be spent assisting her because she is exhausted and unable to go out without her children unless they are being watched. She is a stay-at-home mother whose husband earns a respectable living. They reside in a decent house that is owned rather than rented. To be honest, my nephews aren't really my responsibility. They simply imposed them on me and expected it to stay that way. My sister abruptly hung up on me, but I had recorded the conversation and played it for my parents later. They were outraged and basically went to war with my sister. She dug her heels in, blamed me, and then reaffirmed her idea that my existence should center around her. I told her that was the most narcissistic and entitled thing she had ever said about me. It took days, but her husband eventually intervened and pushed her to apologize to me. I'd never seen her so intimidated by anyone, but she was on the point of tears. It was later revealed that one of the reasons I was the go-to babysitter was that my sister did not trust others. It was never about the money. Or was it? My brother-in-law assumed my sister was paying me for the time I spent after her children after I moved out of my parents' home. She didn't even give me petrol money, just enough money to get pizza for myself and the kids and keep the rest. For months, my sister had been shortchanging me. He yelled at her when this came out during her half-hearted apologies, and she was obliged to pay me what she owed, all from her own savings, which she appeared to be upset about. Then my brother-in-law apologized to me for his own passivity in allowing my sister to walk all over me and vowed to get a regular babysitter from now on. Yes, it will cost them a little money, but my sister will be able to reclaim her date nights. Then there was the family meeting the other evening. We all convened at my parents' place, and everything was laid bare, with apologies all around. My parents reinstated the family vacation, and I still intend to drive myself and pay for my own hotel stay. If my sister tries to relegate me to childcare duties, I'll stay in an entirely different hotel. I've said this, and she has guaranteed me that it will not happen. If I don't post again after my vacation in another month or two, you'll know everything is fine. Update 2. My sister contacted me and demanded that I take down my posts. Knowing how far it has spread has made her much more upset than she was previously. Having a family that is aware of your Reddit account has its drawbacks. My sister called me yesterday after I got off work to see whether any comments were still pouring in. She stated that she cannot take the negativity of looking at them because all of the comments are harmful to her. I was brutally honest. At least 10 comments come in every day, and the majority of them say the same thing about her. She began crying and requesting that I erase my Reddit postings, but I refused, telling her that she could cry to anybody she wanted, but the posts would remain, since they were my promise that she would no longer treat me badly. After all, she felt like my life should revolve around hers, didn't pay me the babysitting money she was due, pocketed it for herself, and forced me to be the continuous babysitter on last year's family vacation. So I had almost no pleasure at all. Is it any surprise that people dislike her so much after she treated me so badly? My sister yelled and hung off when I indicated that the posts had already spread to other websites, since I had been approached a couple of times to allow an article about my position to be written, as well as some videos. My parents immediately contacted and begged me to take down the post. I declined, claiming that I only did this because they did not stand up for me. This would never have happened if they had told my sister to treat me as an equal rather than a servant. I am not her butler, babysitter, or handyman. I am her freaking brother and a mature man. Wouldn't they be bored of this bullshit if they were in my situation? They agreed, but asked me to take down the posts. I refused, saying I'd keep creating more if they didn't start standing up for me when my sister cried to them. Allow her to clean up her own messes, because their enabling of her has led to this. I didn't father those children. I have my own life, a new career, and, ideally, a girlfriend. As there is someone I want to ask out. I am moving forward in my life, and I will not be held back. They could either get out of my way or continue enabling my sister, but I warned them that the latter would end horribly for them. The only way for this Reddit post to stop is if the drama does. I've kept everything anonymous, and I have the right to express my reasonable frustrations. My mother cried, and my father remained silent. I replied, "Tears don't move me. You know what it will take to put an end to this. Quit enabling my sister." My sister called me again, yelling that our parents had informed her they were no longer dealing with this, and that she should figure it out on her own. Oh, and they told her to be kinder to me too. I imagined her eye twitching as she shouted within after hearing that. Be friendly to my little brother? What's this? Should I search it up on Google? Yeah, I was that sarcastic to her. But it made her weep, too. When I hung up, my brother-in-law called me later to hear my side of the story. He was upset that I was still posting and that it had made his wife cry. I explained everything to him, and he promised to talk to my sister again. I'm hoping the drama stops here, but the family vacation is still scheduled for late June. I've already booked my room and requested a day off from work so that we can all travel on Friday. My room is also not near the ones that my parents, sister, Bill, and nephews will use. In actuality, it is not on the same floor. When we go to the shore, if it is not a family activity, I will go where I want and do whatever I want. You can guarantee I'll visit those art galleries, eat local cuisine, and simply relax for a change. Update 3. After the family vacation has come to an end, and as expected, some good and terrible things happened. The good news is that my parents refused to let my sister force me to babysit. Oh, she did try. The bad news is that my sister attempted to find out which room I was in, but she failed and got into trouble with her husband again. To begin, I informed the hotel ahead of time that they were not to disclose any of my personal information to anyone who inquired, with the exception of the police in the event of a major incident. They told me over the phone that they wouldn't tell anyone. On the day of our vacation, I left earlier than the rest of the family. I knew they wouldn't be able to move as a group until 10 a.m., so I left at 9 a.m. Check-in wasn't until 1 p.m., so I wanted to get a jump start. I sent out an FYI group text and took off like a shot to make the 3-hour drive. My parents were furious because they had planned a family brunch on the way, but I pointed out that I had never been informed of this. So it was canceled in favor of fast food, as I had intended. I arrived at the hotel too early to check in, but I informed the desk staff that I was there to ensure that neither my parents nor my sister received any of my information. They claimed they don't do it, but I told them I know it does happen on occasion, so I'm covering my ass. I informed them that they might be dealing with my mother, sister, and 3 potentially weeping sons attempting to guilt them at the desk, and they should not give in. I wanted to know if they tried anything. They clumsily promised me that no one else would have access to my room. Then I decided to go out and get some food. When I returned more than an hour later, there were my parents' cars and Bill's large SUV. I walked to the desk to check in, first ensuring that the foyer was clear, which it was. I asked the clerk whether my family had inquired about me and where I was staying at the motel. They did, but the clerk refused to inform them. My sister supposedly tried to press it, but her husband silenced her. I checked in, walked to my room, and called my parents. I didn't disclose anything they tried with the cashier, and they also didn't mention it. Then we all got together as a family to tour about. My sister once asked me to watch her kids for a moment, and I said, hell no, since I knew precisely what she was doing. She'd pretend to be gone for a moment before disappearing for an hour. I called her out, and her husband warned her to quit, trying to force me to care for their children. What did my sister do? She just started bawling on the spot, claiming she needed a break. Her husband chastised her, stating he was exhausted but didn't complain. My mother gave me a terrible look, so I went up to her and told her that if she believes I should be monitoring those kids, I'm leaving this family vacation right now. It is not my job, and I am weary of her and my sister acting as if it were. That made my mother weep as well, and she just kept saying, "You're right," over and over. This is another old ploy of hers. She tries to appear miserable in order to guilt me, but I simply said, "I am right," and walked away. My mother and sister did not try anything else for the remainder of the day. When we returned to the hotel after dinner, my family crowded the elevator, but I didn't join them. They questioned why, and I replied that I would wait for the next one. My sister stared at me, knowing exactly what I was doing. Then I sat in the lobby for 15 minutes, watching YouTube on my phone before taking the elevator up. I was on a different floor, on the opposite end of the hotel. I had a wonderful night, and the next morning we all went out to breakfast, but I made sure they left first. I was the last to leave, just as I had been the previous night. Breakfast went well, and then I said that I was going to do my own thing for the day. My mother brought up plans to go to the aquarium and a couple of other places, so I agreed to meet them there, but the rest of the day was mine until family dinner. They accepted this, and the day went well. Back at the motel that evening, however, my sister caught me leaving my room. She must have been stalking the entire floor looking for me. I returned to my room to relax a little before supper because I was exhausted after walking so much. When I left my room to join them for dinner, my sister was just down the hall. She tried to corner me and accuse me of ruining her family vacation because it was now no different for her than being at home with her kids to manage. I nicknamed it Bullpit because my parents were quite helpful to her. Then I informed her that I was sick of being her scapegoat, and it was already finished. So leave me alone and get on with your life. Then I began walking while she yelled, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to you." I told her I didn't care and was going to supper. She accompanied me to the elevator, and we said nothing to one another. I didn't keep quiet about it though. I told my parents and brother-in-law that my sister had stalked me to find my room. She was scolded as a child. She had a pity party, but I encouraged her to stop it and grow up. The days when she could impose her will on me were over. Then I left the lobby and got into my car. This time, I was the first one at dinner. When everyone else arrived, my sister appeared depressed, but nothing was spoken about what had happened before, which was good with me. My sister avoided making any contact with me during the evening. This time, I didn't care about riding in the elevator with the rest of them, and I told them straight out that unless there was an emergency, no one would come knocking on my door. I hung a do not disturb sign for a reason. Everything went well on the final day. My sister and mother didn't disturb me at all. They had fully succumbed by this point. Yes, I did play with my nephews throughout the vacation. I am not a complete jerk. I did not stonewall them. I continued to be the fun uncle, but not the babysitter uncle. The children didn't appear to care. They just wanted to play. I also bought each of them a small baggie containing crystals and polished stones to take home as a souvenir. My sister and her husband had some minor arguments, but I didn't pay much attention to them. Overall, I'd call the vacation a success since it finally got home from my mother and sister that the old way of doing things with me was done. And I now have my own life. Update 4. Mother and sister viewed my last post. They don't know when to leave well enough alone. Hey mom and sis, I told you that if you didn't stop, I'd go back to Reddit and here I am. The short version is that when my mother and sister saw my last post, they freaked out. My sister had been following my account for days, knowing I would post. So what did she expect? That I'd simply say everyone had a wonderful time. She called and cried, claiming that I made her look like a bad mother. I responded, well, if the glass slipper fits. My sister continued to argue with me, but I asked her to point out any lies in the post. She attempted multiple times, but I pointed out that every detail was accurate. So what does she do? She calls mommy. Then my mother arrived at my door and demanded that I erase all of the posts. I told her no, and now I have additional ammunition. I ended up making her leave in tears. Later, I called my mother and father and simply told them that their enabling of my sister was the root cause of the prior family dynamic. I'll never go back to the way things were, so if they have any hope left, I'm extinguishing it forever. My parents then begged my sister, for the love of God, stop blaming me and leave me alone. They can't handle the stress of my revenge anymore. My sister had a literal, no one loves me pity party, and my parents had to bring her back to reality. My brother-in-law hasn't called. I believe he's being neutral, but this can't be good for his marriage or my familial connection to him. Out of respect for my brother-in-law, I apologize, but your wife pushed me too far. Currently, my parents are asking that my sister get treatment, since she cannot be a mother while also juggling her old habits. Woman up, as they say. In any case, I hope this will be my last post. Do you hear that, sis? If you don't stop thinking I should have been your personal slave, babysitter, watchdog, and so on, and continue to act as if the entire world is against you because you can't lord over me, we can't be together. If you're willing, maybe we can get along and move on from this bullshit. Do not give me a reason to write anything else. From now on, I will only publish stuff about myself and the treatment I receive from others. Treat me as a nice human being, and this will be over. Capiche? Update. My parents and I had a long conversation in which they apologized, and we've decided that I'll keep my distance until Thanksgiving. I also had a man-to-man conversation with my brother-in-law last night over several cold beers. He warned my sister that she needed counseling or he would leave her, and they are currently looking for a counselor. He also told me that while my sister was an absolute devil to me at home, she is a really caring and endearing wife, albeit she admits that she enjoyed being an only kid. We are over a decade apart in age, so my sister harbored hatred for a long time and allowed it to build up. She's accepted that she does need counseling, and they'll go as soon as it's scheduled. They've also recruited a certified babysitter to care for my nephews. Aside from that, my brother-in-law stated that he was unhappy with me but did not intervene when I needed him. So we agreed that this was all simply a horrible situation that needed to be resolved. We're going to let it slumber in peace from now on. Finally, these posts helped me get a girlfriend. After reading them, the girl I loved suspected it was me and was waiting for me to say something. We'll be out on our first date tonight, so I want to thank everyone here for their overwhelming support. I truly needed it. I discover father-in-law is a pedophile, decide to divorce after wife defends him, and shun sister who spoke out. Original post. My wife Jessica, 32-4, and I 30 have been married for 2 years and are trying for a baby. Jessica has an older sister, Mary, that she isn't close to. She told me that they had a huge falling out over some family drama and just don't speak anymore. I asked a few times about the entire situation, but she would say she doesn't like talking about it and doesn't think it's important. It was Jessica's brother's birthday yesterday, and we were all over at his house to celebrate. Mary made an appearance, and there was a lot of drama. Long story short, she called Jessica and her brothers out for still associating with their dad when they know that he is a child molester. No one was paying her any mind, and I was really confused on what the hell was going on. When Mary left and Jessica and I went home, I asked Jessica what the hell happened. She said that when they were kids, Mary used to claim that their dad used to molest her. I asked if it's true, and Jessica was stuttering a lot. She said she knows her dad used to do bad things, but that Mary cut them all off when she turned 18 and moved out. I asked if she's admitting that she knows her dad was a child molester and did things to his own daughter. She said he doesn't do it anymore, and he was just in a really bad place in his life. And he apologized to Mary, so there's nothing else anyone can do for Mary. I was honestly appalled. I also feel so terrible for Mary. Jessica made it seem like Mary did something wrong and deserved to be basically exiled from the family. I could have never imagined that this is what happened. I asked if she expects me to now be willing to have that man around our future children, and she started shouting at me, saying I'm judging him off something that happened 2 decades ago, and whether I like it or not, he is going to be our child's grandpa, and he will be in their lives. I said if she insists on it, I think we need to hold off on having kids and have serious conversations about it. She's extremely angry at me, but I don't know how I could better react, to be honest. This feels like a huge deal that she is minimizing. AITA relevant comments. Commenter, NTA and run. Please talk to someone from RAIN. They are an organization for victims of sexual assault. This is not something minor like occasionally being crabby with your kids on the mornings you have a migraine. This is a crime. I know a victim of child sexual abuse, and many years later, and thousands of dollars in therapy. This woman is still hurting. You need to get out now. OP. I wish I could accurately describe how Mary looked and sounded when she was going off on her siblings that day. It actually sent shivers down my spine. She looked so angry, but so defeated at the same time. All while they were all looking at her like she was crazy. I still can't wrap my head around it. I want to reach out to her and check if she's all right, but I don't know how appropriate that will be. Commenter, TA, someone who has glossed over child molestation. Would she want to leave a future child of yours with grandpa for the night? That's chilling. And once you have kids, even if you divorced her for this later, you couldn't get full custody over this if grandpa never went to prison for it and isn't a convicted sex offender. It's awful all the way around. I can't believe you've been married 2 years before you even heard this story. Oh, P. That's exactly what I was thinking. He never went to prison. Never been reported to the police at all, and there's no proof of what he did, so I would have no case and no power to keep him away from our children. I don't want to feel helpless about what happens to my children. I don't want to fail them like that. I don't think I should even have them with her at any point now that this has all come to light. Commenter. And I bet she did everything she could to hide this from him, their whole relationship. Whoop. I think this is a huge part of why I'm so angry at her. She had so many opportunities to tell me. There are instances where she had to have actively gone out of her way to keep this entire thing from me. And if Mary hadn't shown up to their brother's birthday party, I would have still been in the dark. Top comment, pedophiles rarely retire. Update, it's been nearly a year since my initial post, so I thought I would give an update. A few days after my original post, I sat Jessica down and told her how I was feeling. I told her I'm not okay with what she and her family had done to Mary. They knew what their dad had done to her, but still chose to take his side and make Mary look crazy. I told her I'm also not okay with brushing her father's crimes under the rug. She was quiet and didn't say anything. She didn't try to defend herself or her family. She was just staring at me in a very chilling way, almost like she was indifferent to whatever I had to say and just wanted it to be over. I told her I needed time to myself, and I would leave and think about what I wanted to do. Suddenly, she was paying attention. She seemed shocked and panicked. She started begging me not to leave, saying, I'll get over it in a few days when we get back to how we usually are and things settle down. She said, all families have skeletons in their closet, and that this can't define our marriage. I said no, and I left the house for a few days. I ignored all her calls and those of her family. I reached out to Mary on Facebook. I wrote her a lengthy message about how I had no idea all she had been through, and that I'm so sorry for how her family treated her. I told her to reach out to me if she ever needs anything. She got back to me and asked if we could meet for coffee. We met up the day after. At first, it was small talk. Then she asked if I would be okay if she told me her version of events. I said, of course, I would, and she spoke to me about it. Everything her dad did and how her family treated her after she told them. I felt physically sick. She even told me stories about how Jessica told her friends that Mary has a mental condition that causes hallucinations. And that just in case Mary starts rumors about their family. That's why. A lot of people still believe Mary has a mental condition because of Jessica. I knew after that talk that I had to end things with Jessica. I went over to our house and told her I want a divorce. I told her I cannot stand the thought of being her husband and a part of their disgusting family. All she did was cry and ask all this for her. I knew then that she hadn't changed. She was still the same person that did all of those things to Mary, and she was still doing them. We're still not officially divorced, but we haven't been together since, and we are going through the process. It's just taking longer than I thought to get it finalized. Mary and I became friends. I invited her to a birthday dinner my family was hosting for me, and she hit it off with my cousin. He's crazy about her, and she seems really happy with him too. He keeps asking me if it would be too early to propose, and I have to tell him to not scare her away lol. But they have a really wholesome relationship, and I'm really happy for them. As for me, I'm just surviving. Divorces are tough, but I know I made the right choice. Thank you to everyone that responded and gave me advice. I really appreciate it. 15 years as a stepmom never felt like family. Until my stepkids had children, and what happened next transformed our relationship completely. I'm Stacy, 42F, and I never anticipated I'd be in this situation. My husband Harry, 46, and I have been married for 15 years, but our journey began much earlier. We met in a local coffee shop, where I was working part-time while finishing off my social work degree. Harry was a regular client who usually ordered the same thing, a big black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He'd walked in with his twins, Lucas and Lydia, now 25, who were just 7 at the time. I recall when I first saw them. Harry appeared fatigued as he tried to manage 2 rambunctious children while balancing his briefcase and coffee. I offered to help them transport their snacks to a table. That tiny act of compassion started a conversation, and we became friends over the course of a few months. Harry revealed to me that he was a widower. His wife, Anna, died when the twins were just 3 years old. She was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer shortly after giving birth and died after receiving significant treatment. Harry was left to raise 2 toddlers alone, while also working as a high school history teacher. As our friendship expanded, so did my feelings for the twins. They were adorable children, but I could see the pain and confusion in their eyes. Lucas was shy and reserved, constantly sticking to his father's side, whilst Lydia was more gregarious, but prone to dramatic outbursts. I began to look forward to their visits, even on my days off. It took Harry about a year to ask me out on a proper date. We were both scared about dating again after losing his wife, and I was concerned about potentially disturbing the lives of 2 children who had already been through a lot. However, we decided to give it a try. Our bond developed slowly. We were careful not to rush anything, especially with the twins. I didn't see them as Dad's girlfriend until we'd been together for 6 months. Even then, we kept things casual by going to the park or watching movies at home. The first major challenge occurred when Harry asked me to move in with them, after we'd been dating for 2 years. The twins were 9 years old at the time, and their opinions were varied. Lucas withdrew even farther, not speaking with me for weeks. Lydia, on the other hand, was thrilled at first, but then began acting out, screaming tantrums, and refusing to follow the rules. It was a hard moment. I was trying to find my position in this ready-made family while still honoring Anna's memory. Harry and I had numerous late-night conversations about how to address the matter. We even contemplated marital therapy to help us navigate this unfamiliar territory. Things gradually improved. I made an intentional effort to spend one-on-one time with each twin. I realized Lucas had a passion for making model airplanes, and we began working on projects together. I signed Lydia up for a pottery class, which became our Saturday morning tradition. When Harry proposed a year later, we sat down with the twins to discuss it before I responded. We wanted them to feel included in the decision-making process. It was not a simple chat. Lydia wondered if this indicated I was attempting to replace their mother. Lucas wondered if they'd have to call me Mom now. We informed them that I was not trying to replace Anna, and that they could call me whatever they wanted. Finally, they granted their blessing, and we were married in a simple ceremony in our backyard. Our only attendants were the twins, Lucas as best man and Lydia as maid of honor. It wasn't ideal, but it was appropriate for our family. The years that followed were filled with both delight and challenges. We had our fair share of family trips, movie nights, and holiday celebrations. But we also coped with the twins' adolescent rebellions, academic challenges, and the constant grieving process. As they got older and learned more about the mother they had lost, I did my best to be present for them without overstepping. I helped with their homework, went to their school events, and even learned how to make Anna's renowned chocolate chip cookies from an old recipe card. There were times when I felt like a member of the family, such as when Lydia asked me to help her shop for her first bra, or Lucas confided in me about his first crush. But there were moments when I felt like an outsider. Every year on Anna's birthday, the three of them went to her grave while I stayed at home. Family gatherings with Harry's parents frequently included reminiscing about Anna, and I felt embarrassed not knowing how to contribute. Despite these hurdles, we were able to build a nice friendship throughout the years. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work. I'd always hoped they'd regard me as more than just their father's wife, perhaps even as a parental figure, but I knew that might not happen. Fast forward to the present day. Lydia welcomed her first kid, a lovely baby girl, last month. She and her husband Jake, 26M, named her Annabelle. Lydia shared a touching post on social media about how they chose the name to honor her late mother, Anna, and Jake's grandmother, B. I was truly thrilled for them. I recall holding Lydia's hand through her wedding day nerves, and now she is a mother herself. But reading the comments made me feel a twinge of hurt. Friends and family commented on how lovely it was that they honored both grandmothers. It dawned on me then that, in their views, I was not regarded as a grandma at all. I did not want to cause a fuss. I didn't want to take away Lydia and Jake's special time. So I liked the post, made a congratulatory comment, and tried to put my emotions aside. A week later, we had a family meal to commemorate the new arrival. Lucas was there with his wife, Emma, 24F, who is expecting their first kid in a couple of months. During dinner, Lucas casually remarked that they were thinking of naming their baby after Harry if it was a male or Emma's mom if it was a girl. I felt the usual agony again, but smiled and nodded in unison with everyone else. After dinner, while Harry and the kids were gushing over newborn Annabelle in the living room, I went out onto the porch for some fresh air. My sister, Jenny, 39F, was visiting and followed me out. Jenny and I have always been close, and she has been my confidant throughout this process of becoming a stepmother. She sensed something was wrong, and after some probing, I confided in her. I told her how I felt left out, how even after 15 years, I felt like an outsider in my own family. I said that while I realized it was ridiculous to be offended over baby names, it further reinforced the reality that the twins would never genuinely see me as family. What I didn't realize was that Harry had come looking for me and overheard some of our talk. He waited until Jenny walked inside before confronting me. He was furious that I hadn't told him about my feelings, arguing that as my husband and the twins' father, he should have been the first to know. I attempted to explain that I didn't want to burden him or cause problems for him and the kids. I realized there was nothing I could do because sentiments and relationships cannot be forced. But Harry insisted on talking to the twins about including me more. I begged him not to, knowing it would only make things awkward and perhaps harm the bond we already have. Harry accused me of concealing secrets and claimed he had the right to know what was going on in his family. We ended up having a heated disagreement with him, accusing me of being selfish for not confiding in him and me, believing he was entirely missing the issue. Things have been tight at home. Harry is still furious that I spoke with Jenny instead of him, and I'm frustrated that he doesn't understand why I kept it to myself. I'm dreading having the twins over for a family cookout this weekend. I'm not sure how to act around them now, knowing Harry might say something. Is it wrong for me not to tell my husband about my feelings? Should I have confided in him despite knowing he'd try to fix things? I am at a loss on what to do next. Update 1. It's been nearly a month since my previous post, and a lot has happened. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their advice and support. which truly helped me gain perspective on the issue. The family cookout, which I was dreading, turned out to be a watershed moment. Despite my pleas, Harry decided to speak with the twins about including me more. As I had expected, things did not start off well. The day began innocently enough. Harry was at the grill. I was putting together the picnic table, and the twins came with their spouses and baby Annabelle. There was the normal gushing over the baby and catching up on recent happenings. But I could sense Harry was nervous, and I readied myself for what I knew would happen. After we'd finished eating, Harry cleared his throat and announced that we needed to have a family conversation. Lucas and Lydia exchanged perplexed looks. Harry began by expressing his pride in the family we had formed together over the last 15 years. Then he delivered the bombshell. He informed the twins that I felt left out and hurt, particularly because I was not considered Annabelle's grandmother. The twins were noticeably shocked. Lydia, still battling with postpartum hormones, burst into sobs. She claimed she never intended to hurt me and had never considered it that way. Lucas, the more restrained one, simply looked uncomfortable and muttered something about wanting to check on Emma. I felt humiliated. This was precisely why I hadn't wanted to say anything. I attempted to calm things down by stating it wasn't a huge issue and that I was just being too sensitive. But Harry, bless his heart, wouldn't let it go. He insisted that we all sit down and discuss it. The conversation that followed was passionate and emotional, lasting several hours. We discussed the past 15 years, both the good and the bad. The twins talked about their devotion to their mother's memories and their early resentment of me. Lucas said that when I first came in, he was concerned I was attempting to replace his mother. He admitted that he used to hide the few images they had of Anna, afraid I would get rid of them. It crushed my heart to hear this, because I had always tried to cherish Anna's memory. Lydia admitted that she sometimes felt bad about admiring me as if it were a violation of her mother's memories. She told of a time when she was 13 and had her first period while Harry was abroad at a conference. She expressed her gratitude that I was there to assist her, but she also felt bad that her mother was not present to enjoy that moment with her. I confessed my personal insecurities and my ongoing struggle to find my position within the family. I told them about the times I'd stayed up late to help with school projects, the soccer games and dancing recitals I'd attended, and how pleased I was of each accomplishment. But I also admitted to feeling hurt when I was presented as Dad's wife, rather than as a parental figure. To my amazement, Lucas and Lydia had no idea how I felt. They revealed that they had always seen me as a positive influence in their life, but they had no idea how much I had spent emotionally. We all cried a lot that day. It was difficult, but also cathartic. By the end, we had come to a new understanding. The twins realized that while I could never replace their mother, I had been a consistent and loving presence in their lives. They apologized for not acknowledging my role more clearly. I apologized for not articulating my feelings more effectively throughout the years. We all decided that in the future, we would make a greater effort to communicate our gratitude to one another. The BBQ concluded on a considerably lighter note than it began. Lydia grabbed me hard as they left, whispering, "We love you, Stacy. You are family, and always have been." Since then, things have changed. There is a new openness in our connections. Lucas and Emma have started asking for my advice on baby names, and Lydia has been sending me photos of Annabelle on a regular basis, frequently with notes like, "Grandma Stacy's little angel." Lydia called me last week in a panic because Annabelle was running a high temperature. She said, "Mom, I don't know what to do." It was the first time she'd ever called me Mom, and while she was probably too stressed to notice, it meant the world to me. After everyone had left, Harry and I had a private conversation. I explained why I had been hesitant to express my sentiments to him, and he apologized for reacting so passionately. We've both made a commitment to improve our communication moving forward. It isn't perfect, and we're all still figuring things out. But for the first time in 15 years, I actually feel like a member of the family. Sometimes it takes a difficult encounter to clear the air and go on. Update 2. It has been 6 months since my last report, and I would like to highlight some big changes in our family dynamics. 2 months ago, Lucas and Emma welcomed their baby child. They named him Christopher Thomas, after Emma's father and Harry. But here's what surprised me. They wanted me to be the godmother. When they explained their decision, Lucas stated, "Stacy, you've always been a source of strength and love in our life. We want our youngsters to have the same unshakable presence." I was moved beyond words. It felt like a genuine appreciation of my role in their lives. The baptism ceremony was magnificent. And when holding little Christopher, the first, felt an unexpected wave of love. The twins' christening brought up memories of their childhood. I recall one day when Lucas was about 10 years old and had a large school presentation. He was so frightened that morning that he became ill. Harry had a crucial meeting that he couldn't miss, so I stayed at home with Lucas. We spent the morning rehearsing his speech, and I taught him some deep breathing methods to help calm his anxieties. When he arrived home that afternoon, beaming with pleasure from his great presentation, he hugged me tightly and said, "Thank you, Stacy. You are the best." That was one of the first times I really felt like a parent to him. Lydia has also been making attempts. She's been phoning me nearly every day, asking for guidance on anything from diaper rash to sleep routines. Last week, she invited me to a grandma-granddaughter day out with Annabelle. We went shopping, ate lunch, and she introduced me to her pals as my other mom, Stacy. I'll be honest, that made me cry a little. Lydia shared a wedding-related reminiscence with us on our day out. She informed me that shortly before, walking down the aisle, she experienced a moment of terror and wished her mother was present. But then she looked over and saw me, and a sense of serenity came over her. She went on, "I realized then that while I'll always miss my mom, I'm so grateful to have you too." Harry has been absolutely supportive throughout this. He's made a concerted effort to engage me in family choices and discussions about the grandchildren. He frequently reminds the twins to keep me informed about things, which I appreciate. However, not everything has gone smoothly. We encountered a minor snag last month when Harry's parents came to visit. They made some casual remarks about how fortunate the twins were to have their real grandparents around. I saw Harry tense up, about to say something, but Lucas and Lydia jumped in to correct him. They insisted that I was just as much a grandparent to their children. It made me proud to watch them stand up for our relationship. Harry's parents were taken aback, but appeared to accept it. Later, Harry apologized for his parents' actions, but I told him that it was unnecessary. The fact that the twins had protected meant more than an apology. We're arranging a huge family vacation next month, including the grandchildren. It's the first time we've done something like this, so I'm both excited and nervous. But ultimately, I'm thankful for how far we've come. This trip has taught me that family is more than blood and titles. It is about love, understanding, and the willingness to go through challenging emotions together. I'm looking forward to many more years of being Grandma Stacy to these amazing grandchildren. Update 3. It's been a year since my first post, and I'd want to provide a last update on our family's journey. The family vacation I mentioned in my last update was a watershed moment for us. We leased a beach home for 2 weeks, and it was the first time we'd been together for an extended amount of time since the twins left for college. Spending time together strengthened our ties. Of course, there were tense moments. Living in close quarters with in-laws and tiny children isn't easy. We had a few disagreements about who was responsible for babysitting and who was in charge of cooking dinner. But there were also numerous instances of delight in laughing. One day, we went to the beach together, watching Harry and Christopher construct sandcastles, while Lydia and I took turns. Dipping Annabelle's toes in the surf gave me a sense of contentment I hadn't felt before. That evening, as we gathered around a bonfire roasting marshmallows and telling stories, Lydia stepped up and announced that she and Jake are expecting their second child in around 7 months. Then she smiled at me and said, "Stacy, if it's a girl, we'd like to name her after you, Stacy Anna, to honor both the amazing women who have been mothers to me." I was speechless. Harry squeezed my hand, and I could tell he was also in tears. Lucas added that if they have a girl next, they would like to do the same. It was an experience I will never forget. The remainder of the holiday was spent talking excitedly about the new baby and remembering the twins' childhood. One evening, Lucas took out an old photo album he had brought with him. As we glanced through it, we noticed a photo from their high school graduation. In it, I stood between Lucas and Lydia, all of us smiling at the camera. Lucas pointed to it and remarked, You know, Stacy, I remember this day vividly. I was quite apprehensive about my speech, and you spent the entire morning helping me practice. I could not have done it without you. Since returning from vacation, our relationships have only gotten stronger. The twins frequently joke about their children having three sets of grandparents: Harry's parents, their in-laws, and ourselves. They ensure that we are all equally involved in our grandchildren's lives. Last month, when Christopher took his first steps, Lucas made sure to FaceTime us so we could see it live. Lydia contacted me in tears last week because Annabelle had said her first word, Nana, as she calls me. Throughout all of this, Harry and I have become closer. He has told me several times that he is proud of how I have handled everything, and that he is grateful for the love I have offered his children throughout the years. He surprised me the other day by pulling up our old wedding video. We spent the evening viewing it, laughing at how young we all looked and reflecting on how far we'd come. Last week was our 16th wedding anniversary. The twins surprised us with a family photo shoot featuring all four grandparents, themselves, their spouses, and the grandchildren. When we received the images, one stuck out. It was a picture of myself with Lucas, Lydia, and the grandchildren. All of us laughing at something off camera. Looking at it, you'd never guess I wasn't their biological mother. Lydia had it framed and gave it to me with the following note: "To the woman who chose to love us, thank you for being our bonus mom. We love you." As I sit here writing this with a photo on my desk, I am overwhelmed with thankfulness. This path has not been simple, but it has been extremely rewarding. To anyone dealing in a mixed family scenario, I encourage them to keep loving, trying, and talking. It may take some time, but it is worth it. Our family is not perfect, but it is our own. We still have disputes and misunderstandings, but we approach them with open hearts and honest communication. The road ahead isn't always apparent, but I'm interested to see where it takes us. As for me, I'm excited to meet baby Stacy Anna in a few months and continue to make memories with this beautiful family that I'm so privileged to be a part of. My infertile sister-in-law attacked me at my baby shower. Now she wants to meet my daughter after losing her own baby. I've been married to my hubby, Sam, 34M, for 7 years. We met at a mutual friend's wedding in 2016. I was a bridesmaid, and Sam was a groomsman. We were matched to go down the aisle together, and there was an instant connection between us. Following the wedding, we spent the entire reception chatting and laughing. By the end of the night, we had swapped numbers and planned our first date. Following that, our relationship swiftly progressed. We learned we had a lot in common, including a passion for hiking, a similar interest in true crime podcasts, and a desire to create a family eventually. After a year of dating, Sam proposed during a twilight trek on our favorite trail. 6 months later, we celebrated a gorgeous fall wedding with our closest friends and family. We knew we wanted children from the outset. We began trying for a baby shortly after our honeymoon. At first, it was exhilarating. We joked about whether the baby would inherit my curly hair or Sam's dimples. But as the months went without a positive pregnancy test, that elation faded into anxiety. We attempted everything to improve our chances. I began meticulously tracking my ovulation, and we both made lifestyle adjustments. Sam stopped smoking, a habit he had since college. I gave up my favorite morning coffee. We joined the gym together, determined to get in the best shape of our lives, but nothing changed. After 2 years of unsuccessful attempts, we decided to see a reproductive doctor. Dr. Anderson performed various tests on both of us. The weeks spent waiting for findings were some of the most stressful of our life. When the results were eventually in, they were frustratingly inconclusive. There was no obvious explanation why we couldn't conceive. Dr. Anderson recommended us to keep trying, stating that sometimes these things simply need time. During this time, Sam's younger sister, Rachel, 29F, married her college sweetheart, Jack, 31M. Their wedding was a spectacular occasion, and I remember feeling envious as Rachel tossed her bouquet and joked about how she and Jack would be the next to have a baby. Little did I know how important that moment would be in our lives. As our struggle to conceive progressed, we began to feel isolated from our friends and family. It appeared that everyone around us was having babies effortlessly. Our social media accounts were flooded with pregnancy announcements and baby images, and each one felt like a hit in the gut. We began declining invites to baby showers and first birthday parties, finding them too hard to attend. After 5 years of trying, it finally happened. I was a week late, but I was reluctant to take a test because I didn't want to be disappointed again. Sam finally bought a pregnancy test and pushed me to use it. When those two pink lines emerged, we both erupted into tears of happiness. We must have taken 5 additional exams just to be certain. Given our background, we chose to wait until 12 weeks to announce the pregnancy. The weeks spent concealing our secret were both thrilling and terrible. Every sensation or wave of discomfort pushed me into a frenzy, fearing something might go wrong. But when our 12-week scan revealed our tiny beam dancing around on the screen, we realized it was time to express our delight. We announced our pregnancy during a family meal. Sam's parents were having their annual summer barbecue, which seemed like an ideal chance. When we announced the news, the response was extraordinary. Sam's mother burst into delighted tears. His father hugged him tightly, and my parents could not stop smiling. It was a magnificent moment that I will remember forever. Despite the excitement and congrats, I couldn't help but observe Rachel's reaction. While everyone else was rejoicing, she remained sat, her expression unreadable. When she eventually came over to congratulate us, her hug was stiff and her grin couldn't reach her eyes. I dismissed it at the time, figuring she was simply stunned by the news. As my pregnancy progressed, we began to prepare for our baby's birth. We transformed our home office into a nursery by painting the wall,